I'm Danny, and I'm 34 years old at the moment. A lot of my internal pain really comes from two key people, my folks and my older brother, Alex, who is now 38. My parents, Janet, a nurse, and Mark, an electrician, were just average folks in pretty much every way, except for how they clearly played favorites with Alex. This preference for him colored my childhood with unfairness, giving him all the best stuff while making mine feel dull and lifeless. Living in Elmswood, a pretty average town where everyone knew everything about everyone else, didn't help things at all. It felt like our small community was a spotlight, constantly highlighting the differences between Alex and me. Whether it was school, a gathering, or just the supermarket, I was always known as Alex's younger brother, like some second fiddle to my more successful sibling. From the very beginning that I can remember, Alex was always the favorite. Birthdays, occasions that should have been a special time, were where the favoritism truly surfaced. When I turned 10 on a cold but pleasant October day, I was looking forward to my birthday party at our house, but even that was impacted by Alex, as Mom and Dad allowed him to pick the party theme. He picked superheroes, even though he knew I was a dinosaur fan. That smug grin spread across his face as he strutted about, flaunting a Superman cape, while I sat there miserably, my T-Rex outfit suddenly feeling awkward and immature. The holidays were always the same. Every Christmas, Alex would be the first one scrambling towards the tree, ripping through the paper on presents that usually contained the newest gizmos or fun items, the things he desired. My gifts were often useful, like clothing, books, or even worse, stuff intended for older kids, which Alex would somehow end up taking anyway. The unfairness of it all was like a pebble in my boot, always there and irritating. Mom and Dad seemed oblivious to the inequality, or maybe they just didn't want to see it. They would applaud everything Alex did, even the smallest accomplishments, and make up reasons for his mistakes. On the other hand, my successes were met with a simple acknowledgement or a polite smile, and my failures were just proof that I was either lazy or didn't have any ability. This bias went far beyond the presents and festivities. During dinner, Alex would tell them all about his day, his plans, and his buddies, and our parents would hang on every word, giving him their undivided attention. When it was my turn to speak, their eyes would seem to drift off, as though they were just killing time until the commercials were over and the real show came back on. This recurring pattern of not caring about me really messed me up. I felt a deep-seated sense of being unworthy, and I genuinely believed I wasn't as deserving of love as my sibling. These negative emotions were intensified by hushed words of sympathy, or the comparisons that neighbors and relatives made, constantly pointing out how different Alex and I were, and always highlighting his advantages. As time went on, the division between us became more pronounced. High school introduced new difficulties, including dealing with bullies. I was a simple victim, not only for my classmates, but also it often felt like fate itself was against me. Alex, always the likable one, was well-liked and good at sports. He did very well in athletics and had a large social group. Conversely, I was studious and shy, often tormented for being so quiet, as well as for wearing clothes that had been handed down to me, some of which had originally belonged to Alex. One specific memory that really hurt me happened during our time in high school, when I was 15 and Alex was 19. It was the day of the school's yearly talent show, an occasion I was really looking forward to because I was going to play a piano piece that I had been working on perfecting for months. I recall stepping onto the stage with butterflies in my stomach, only to discover Alex in the front row, surrounded by his friends, smirking at me. In the middle of my performance, a rude and loud heckle from his area broke my focus. I messed up. My fingers stumbled over the keys, creating a discordant mess. The audience's laughter hurt me more than any physical harm could have. Following the show, my parents consoled Alex, who pretended to be innocent, claiming that his friends were the ones to blame. It felt like my feelings didn't matter at all. This pattern continued into our adult lives. I observed Alex, who had a business degree courtesy of our parents, effortlessly advancing in his career. On the other hand, I had a tough time at community college, working various jobs to cover tuition, finally getting a computer science degree through hard work and perseverance. The disparity wasn't limited to school or personal success. Even when it came to relationships, I felt the hurt of our parents not really caring. When I told them I was gay at age 22, my parents remained completely silent, and Alex made a nasty comment, saying he didn't want to share a room during family gatherings because he didn't feel safe. That comment cut deep because our parents didn't say a thing. As I approach middle age now, I find myself remembering these events, not because I want to dwell on the past, but because life has presented a harsh twist of fate. Alex, the brother who made my younger years miserable, is now fighting a terminal disease. To understand what happened to him, let's rewind to approximately 2 months ago. I had one of the rare moments where I actually felt looked after and secure. The cost of it all, however, was the passing of my grandparents, which was devastating. Their loss drastically changed my life, making the contrast between their constant affection and my parents' blatant disregard even more obvious. My grandparents had always been my safe haven, a place I could always go. Unlike my folks, who constantly lavished my older brother with presents and attention, my grandparents gave me something far more meaningful. They loved and accepted me without any stipulations. They understood the disparity in our family and did everything within their capability to make me feel important. Whenever I went to see them, it was as if I'd entered a place where I finally mattered. They'd listen closely to the things I would tell them about school and the small things I did well, which my parents often ignored, always choosing to celebrate my brother's accomplishments. The different ways my grandparents and my parents treated my brother and me were striking. Compared to my parents, who obviously preferred my older brother, my grandparents showed both of us love and care, although it frequently seemed like they put in extra effort to counteract the inequity back home. My grandparents were the type of individuals who thought that treating everyone fairly was the best thing to do. They frequently tried to gently steer my folks towards treating my brother and me the same way, yearning to mend the visible divide. "Give the boys a fair shake. Both of them are deserving of your love and backing," they'd declare in their quiet, knowledgeable voices. Even with these talks, which I secretly listened to more than once, my parents' actions stayed exactly the same. It was crystal clear that they favored my brother, and their ears appeared shut to anyone who suggested they be unbiased. My grandparents' love was demonstrated in their gestures and those tiny, ordinary occurrences. They consistently showed up at all my school events, shouting encouragement for me just as enthusiastically as they did for my brother, maybe even louder, to make up for my folks' often weak interest in my accomplishments. Whenever it was birthday time, they'd bend over backwards to ensure my presents and cake were as impressive as what my brother got, sometimes even more so, to quietly even things out. Losing them wasn't just a devastating loss of love and encouragement. It also signaled the end of the only support I had within my family. It highlighted how much they had worked to protect me and help me thrive, actions that were discreet but incredibly meaningful. They understood the obstacles I faced and tried in their own unique ways to shield me, even if it meant standing up to their own kids. The day we lost them was a somber, heartbreaking one. They had been involved in a minor vehicle collision, but given their fragile health, they were unable to recover. The whole thing happened so fast, and suddenly I felt like I was adrift, without my main source of emotional strength. At the memorial service, while people were quietly talking about legal documents and what would be left behind, I was overwhelmed by sadness, grieving not only their passing but the boundless love that was gone forever. Listening to the will being read felt heavy and solemn, and that's when I discovered the final thoughtful act my grandparents had arranged for me. They surprised everyone by leaving me their home and a significant amount of cash. $500,000. It was a totally unexpected twist that really upset my family, especially my mom and dad, who thought my brother would get everything, like he always did. But the most shocking thing was still coming. My grandparents always knew about the special treatment my brother got, as well as the manipulative side of my parents. In order to keep me safe and maybe teach everyone a thing or two about what's really important versus trickery, they added a strange rule regarding another sum of money. This was the money my brother believed he was supposed to get, a large amount that was supposedly hidden in a special envelope, but actually the envelope only had fake play money inside. That moment is etched in my memory. My parents, who always showed obvious favoritism to my brother, were practically beaming with happiness, like they were sharing in his victory. You could practically feel how delighted they were, as if they had hit the jackpot themselves. They were murmuring with excitement, already mapping out ways this unexpected fortune could improve our family's financial situation. Maybe they didn't stop to think, but secretly they probably wished my brother would give them a portion of his newfound riches. However, the happiness of that instant felt tarnished to me. On the outside looking in, I observed my brother's face brighten with a greedy eagerness as he ripped open the letter. His tone, full of an arrogant sense of accomplishment, which he hadn't earned, shattered the festive atmosphere. "At last, something to validate my tolerance of this family," he sneered, his eyes avoiding mine as though I was insignificant. It wasn't just that he got what should have been my portion, too. He had to make it even worse. "I suppose this means I can finally escape all of this. Particularly you," he said with a nasty laugh, his stare quickly dismissing me. His words were a painful blow, made worse by my then unawareness that the money was counterfeit. In that moment, I thought he had obtained real wealth, a fortune that could have completely changed my life, which was definitely not as fortunate as his. The secret hopes I'd held, for independence, for a simple life, for simply being treated equally, seemed to fall apart right in front of me. I experienced a profound sense of remorse, not only because I believed I'd lost my final opportunity for improvement, but also due to the sharp division that money had created between us. His comments about who I am were probably the most hurtful. From the moment I revealed I was non-binary, my brother took every chance to mock and demean me, as though my being was an affront to his rigid beliefs. "Don't think I'm going to clean up your problems," he would say with clear contempt, intentionally using the wrong pronouns to inflict pain. "Can you imagine being so eager to be different that you end up like asterisk that?" His sarcastic remarks clearly conveyed the contempt he held, echoing the less obvious but equally painful rejection I received from my parents. Shockingly, and particularly to our parents, my brother didn't stick around to celebrate his good fortune. On the day after, he packed up and left, his actions as cold and deliberate as his leaving. He moved in with his girlfriend, who, unknown to him, was more concerned about his alleged wealth than about him as an individual. My parents, left behind after his sudden exit, were flabbergasted. Years spent putting him first, reshaping family interactions to benefit him, hadn't resulted in any gratitude, but instead in abandonment. Their expressions, once animated with anticipation, now reflected the betrayal they were feeling, a painful understanding that their prized child had left and wouldn't be returning. Yet the real situation unfolded in a stunning way. After a few days, following my brother abruptly leaving for his girlfriend's apartment, I got a call from him, the initial one in a string of hurried, increasingly apologetic conversations. Turns out the money was phony, like the kind you get in a board game, but carefully placed inside a legit bank envelope. Apparently, his girlfriend, who was clearly motivated by material things, unceremoniously tossed him out once she found out the cash was fake. Now, my brother, homeless and utterly embarrassed, was suddenly without the riches he had been boasting about, and also without the girlfriend he had chosen instead of his family. This discovery didn't make me feel more sympathetic. Instead, it solidified the anger that had been building up within me for a long time. When he showed up on my porch, his expression a mixture of fury and despair, a sense of icy determination came over me. This was the brother who had made my life miserable when we were kids, the one who had stood by and watched, or even encouraged, others to do the same. This was the brother who had never once defended me, not when I was teased for being different, nor when I was having trouble finding my place in the world. The day my brother arrived at my home, it wasn't a simple knock of distress. It was the result of several things that had occurred since he'd been conned with the fake money that our grandparents had cleverly concealed as part of an inheritance. Based on what he said to me, before deciding to come here, he had tried going to our parents' house seeking shelter and perhaps a little help financially. The welcome he got there was a major letdown, nothing like he'd anticipated. Growing up, our folks always seemed to favor him, constantly giving him all the attention and presents. Still, when he showed up needing help, they shut him out. They figured he'd wasted the cash, or what he thought was money, on expensive things, or maybe his girlfriend, who was known for loving expensive stuff. He said our folks called him a liar about the money, saying it wasn't real. They seemed to think he was making up excuses to get more money out of them. Their disappointment was clear in their tone. They felt he'd betrayed them, not just by leaving so suddenly after getting his inheritance, but also by ignoring them since moving in with his girlfriend. It felt like he'd picked his own life over his family and was only back now because he was in a bind. During that period, I was living at our grandparents' place. I was looking after the house, living calmly away from the constant family arguments that always involved my parents and my brother. It was a refuge from the painful memories of being overlooked and the preferential treatment that still got to me. When my brother told me what happened to him, I actually felt a small wave of empathy rise up inside me. It was him, the golden boy, who never really seemed to think about how his choices and words affected other people, especially me. And now he was asking for help from the brother he'd constantly made fun of and treated poorly. He had fallen a long way, and his current situation was a tough learning experience in being humble. Yet all those years I was second best. All the times I suffered through his nasty jokes and our parents clearly favoring him had made me less sensitive. He sounded shocked and wounded when he talked about our parents turning away from him, as if it was impossible they wouldn't stand by him. It was kind of funny, now that I thought about all the times he'd done the same thing to me, both when we were kids and as adults. Though his story was full of desperation and a need to fix things, I noticed the lack of true apology for how badly he had treated me throughout the years. It seemed to me that he was more bothered by losing his comfortable life and position than he was with the chance to fix our broken relationship. Seeing him there, looking more fragile than I could ever remember, I realized I had a decision to make. Could I truly forget all the years of disregard, the recollections of holidays where I saw him get presents I should have been given? Could I possibly excuse him, and our parents too, since they'd created such an inequality between us? I listened silently, as my thoughts were a whirlwind of recollections and feelings. Ultimately, my answer was based not just on the pain I felt from the past, but also on understanding what I had to do to safeguard my own sense of calm. I'd established a new existence for myself here in our grandparents' home, a life separate from the constant triggers of feeling less significant in our family. A long time has passed since I closed the door on my brother, and as time went on, the specifics of his life became blurry and vague. I don't have any idea where he resides, nor have I kept up with the current events happening in his life. That is, until today when an unexpected text interrupted our silence, bringing up old hurts with news of his sickness. He was unwell, fighting a brain tumor, and often going in and out of the hospital. He couldn't pay for the operation, and he was asking for assistance, but it resonated deeply within me. It wasn't just a request for money. It was a cry for family help, something he'd refused to give me all through our younger years and into our adulthood. I clearly recalled all the events of the past, including his hurtful comments and unkind deeds, and they returned with sharp clarity. Growing up, he was always the favorite, the one who got all the newest toys and endless love from mom and dad, while I kind of faded into the background, like an extra in the family story. Now, seeing him in a hospital bed, weak and reaching out to me, all those old emotions resurfaced. Could I refuse to help him when it looked like he might be near the end? Had my bitterness become so strong that I could ignore a dying man, my own brother, no matter what we'd been through? Thinking about what he wanted, scenes from our childhood flashed through my head, almost like a sad movie. There were times he could have stood up for me, occasions he could have shared, situations where he could have just been the brother I needed, but those moments never materialized. Instead, there were hurtful comments, a lot of ignoring, and above all, a clear message that I wasn't as good as him, not worthy of the same affection and attention he got so easily. His words from our last argument repeated in my head. Where were you when I was being picked on? Where were you when I got fired? Where were you when I married my husband? Every question was a harsh reminder of his lack of support, of his decision to leave me out, to make fun of me for who I was, and now he needed me. Now, when everyone else had walked away after his charisma and money had run out, he remembered he had a brother. I sat there, wrestling with his plea, and it felt like the old hurts were opening up again. Was I a terrible human being for pausing, for wanting to reject him, mirroring his past actions? Maybe. Yet forgiving somebody is tricky. True forgiveness goes way beyond just being in a tough spot. While I was really thinking hard, I understood that what I decided would not only dictate what happened to him, but also who I aimed to be when facing such deep hurt. Ultimately, I did reply. My words were straightforward, without the negativity that was present last time we interacted. I sincerely wish you locate the assistance you need, I typed. It was not an agreement to help him, nor a flat denial. It was more like drawing a line in the sand. I couldn't just undo the history between us, nor magically fix the pain I felt. However, I could decide how to proceed, not driven by anger or bitterness, but with the calm self-respect of a person who had learned to value their own needs without the benefit of family support. As I hit send, I was overcome with a sense of calm. I had reacted not because of ill will, but because I felt centered. Whether he saw my words as kindness or aloofness was irrelevant. I'd provided what I could, a small overture of harmony to calm my own thoughts and hopefully to fix a relationship that had been neglected for ages. In creating distance, I found serenity, understanding that being decent doesn't always require solving every problem. Sometimes it's just about doing what you are able while honoring both yourself and the circumstances that created you. I should have seen it coming, honestly. My parents' reaction was entirely predictable when they learned I wouldn't assist my brother. It started with them calling me relentlessly, one phone call after another. I saw their numbers pop up on my phone screen, and I immediately understood that picking up the phone would only lead to a repetition of old complaints and fault-finding. So I decided to ignore the calls, not answering any of them. However, it didn't stop the issue entirely, it just delayed the inevitable. One day, I heard the persistent sound of knocking on my front door. With some hesitation, I opened the door and saw my parents standing there, their expressions a combination of anger and what seemed to be a quiet form of pleading. The first few moments were just as unpleasant as I expected. "How could you abandon your own brother when he needs you?" my father said, his voice heavy with judgment. My mother jumped in with her usual condescending tone, "And I thought we raised you better, even with your way of life." The slight hesitation before the word way of life, along with the way she said it, made it clear that she was talking about my sexual orientation, something they'd never fully come to terms with. As we stood there and the time ticked away, their anger seemed to gradually shift into a plea for understanding, though it was reluctant and tinged with desperation. "He's your brother, he needs assistance." My mom begged me, her composure cracking with tears. I figured it was for my brother, and also, I imagined, for the broken picture of a unified family that she treasured. I was unyielding, even though I was struggling inside. "Listen," I began, my voice sounding stronger than I felt. "I understand he's facing difficulties, but why am I constantly the one expected to give things up? Where was this family togetherness when I required support, when I was picked on, overlooked, pushed aside?" There was no good answer to those questions, and we all knew this. The room went quiet, an unspoken agreement about all the instances when they hadn't backed me up. After that, the chat shifted towards the house and the inheritance from my grandparents, the sole genuine support I had ever experienced. My folks were aware of the home my grandparents had given me, meant as a safety net and an expression of love, acknowledging the unfairness I'd dealt with over my lifetime. It's a significant amount, and the home has considerable value. I sighed, feeling the pressure of making a choice. The house is more than just a place to me. It's a reminder of the only people who ever made me feel appreciated and loved. This isn't just about funds. It's about keeping hold of the only positive aspect of a past that was marked by inequity. I clarified, hoping they'd grasp the extent of what they were asking me to let go of. The request transformed into further complaints and attempts at deals, but I could see through their anxiety and noticed it was the same old routine. The decision my folks were hopping for was one that would soothe their conscience and make them feel better, even if it meant overlooking the true price, the emotional and monetary burdens that it would put on me. Right now, I'm really in a tough spot. There's a piece of me that wants to move beyond the pain of the past and offer my help to my brother, who, even with all the history between us, honestly requires it. But another side of me is pushing back, having been constantly dismissed and underestimated for years. This home, my safe haven, is far more significant than just a financial investment to me. It shows how my grandparents saw my value and how they aimed to shield me even after they were gone. I'm sitting here wondering what to do, stuck between wanting to be a better person than the one who suffered those things, and the need to guard the inheritance that truly belongs to me. What do you think I should do?